Right, so moving perfectly at 10:15, which is what my revised time was, onto the panel. So just to introduce the panel, so starting nearest, we've got Jamie True, who's CEO of LifeWorks. And next to him is Sam Kirk, Reward Director of TalkTalk. Second from the end, Paul Bissell, who's Head of Reward and Policy at Three. And on the end, Damien Teisseire, Global Reward Director of Experian. And we are going to try and talk about some of the innovations in technology. So we're going to pick up on some of the points that I just raised, and then some new points as well. So to get the panel started, I've asked each one of them to have a think about what the innovations in technology they would like to see within whichever reward and benefit systems they're familiar with. So perhaps if I can start with Damien, if you can talk about that.
Sure. From my perspective, we look at customers into the markets, and obviously customers have the choice. Employees have the choice as well nowadays. We think about the workforce of tomorrow. In the US, we're being told that 40% of the workforce in the US are actually contractors. When you're actually in the company more than 7 to 8 months, it's actually a long time nowadays. So we need to be nimble enough to actually provide employees with a platform which is agile in terms of the onboarding process, going to the exits of the company. So I think we need a platform where people will have the choice in the same way as customers will have the choice. This is the way to actually keep them on board, keep them attracted and motivated over time. And in terms of the products available, we need to make sure that the platform is actually flexible enough, agile enough, and we have some mobile, systems in place to allow for this agility for employees to actually, be attracted to the company and actually apply wherever they are in the world.
Fantastic. So contractors, agile working, flexible working will have an impact on how we think about technology in the future. Paul, what are some of the things that you'd like to see?
So I think for me, Damien touched on it, the ability of the platforms to treat employees as customers. Employees are so used now to a digital world outside of work, which is slick, it's smooth, it's easy, it's informed. It frustrates me, I think, in businesses, the amount of time you spend trying to convince people to spend budget on improving these types of systems, when if you substituted customer for employee, you wouldn't be having that debate. You would be constantly innovating. And I don't think we've been constantly innovating. Two other things for me is integration, so the ability to have everything in one place. And you alluded to it, Debbie, artificial intelligence, for exactly the same reasons that you were alluding to it. If you think how many people, for example, go into your default pension fund, because what do they know other than to do that? Wouldn't it be much nicer if you were able to use life stage information to question decisions or prompt thinking without having to engage personally with those people? Wouldn't it be better if the system could actively engage and have dialogue with those people to help them make the right decisions? Pension landscape's changed. How quickly has your default fund changed? You're not going to buy an annuity with it anymore, but I'll bet you there's a lot out there that are still aiming to do that.
Sam, what would you like to see in terms of innovation?
I think probably building on what Paul's just said, the employee absolutely has to be at the centre of the technology that you're using. They're your biggest advocate of your company and of your products, if you have them. Your employees, therefore, need to sell your business. One of the best ways is by them really engaging with benefits, comp, whatever it might be. So I think you have to have a system that's really easy to use, that's really straightforward, that stands for your business values. One of our employees the other day was blogging about his race against getting home versus an Amazon shopping experience. He set himself a challenge. Could he buy products on Amazon within an hour and get home before they were delivered from Shepherd's Bush to St Albans? And he did it with like 2 minutes to spare. But I think the market of consumers is changing. People expect to have everything at their fingertips straight away. And I think with benefits technology, it's evolving, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think that from a provider perspective, there's necessarily that immediacy of choice for employees. It still feels a little bit clunky to get there. And I think we're constantly battling with how do we make it more seamless? How do we get that supply and demand at a good balance? So I think that's really important. I also think there's got to be a really good mixture of providing your employees with a choice, but also giving a bit of education. So building on your point about default funds, one of the big things for me now is how do we start to give more information to employees, not only about pension, about wider wellbeing initiatives, and how do you integrate it and get it all into one place so that people have got a reason to constantly go back and revisit that portal to look at the choices they've got and to try and become more informed, not just to go in once a year and go, I'd like that benefit, and then not ever go back again.
Jamie, so Jamie comes from the, I suppose, the supplier side, but also from a very strong tech background. So I'm hoping you're going to sort of bring in quite a big picture view about innovation. Okay. So Jamie, what are you seeing out there?
I don't know, does anyone in the room have an Amazon Echo? Hands up if you do. I'm sure you like it. It's quite a best kept secret from Amazon, but one thing I'm excited about is the best interfaces don't have an interface, and that's a really good example of that. It's a bit of technology where you talk to it and it listens. It's like Siri, but it actually works really well. And it's really enjoyable, and it makes you really quite engaged, especially kids. So for us as a wellness and engagement company, I think what everyone was saying just now about putting the employee at the heart, our philosophy is kind of putting lots of kind of solutions into one. So the challenge for us in technology, and I think here, is how do you make the interface not so busy and have no interface so it's engaging? So I think the AI point is huge, but I think AI, again, I think the challenge is the UX and the user experience, because if you've got great AI, but you've got a clunky user experience, it doesn't really help. So our big stuff that we're going through right now, just from a personal experience, is we've got all these great things where you tie recognition and reward and wellness and fitness tracking and mental well-being. You have to put them together. And what would be the best AI interface? And we've come to the kind of solution, but chat is the best way, like the Alexa. So if you could actually just have an interface which is just purely chat and conversational, I think that's what people are really excited. There's nothing worse than when you have to keep logging into different screens and do different things. And I think that's a huge frustration. So when you look at, I'm quite excited by Amazon. I wasn't really before, but now I am, just the way they make everything just one click and seamless. So I feel that, the personalization using AI, but from a chat front end, I think it's going to be a major part, because if employees are at the heart, it's conversational, and if everything has to be linked together, which means it's busy, I don't think there's any other way to do that.
Interesting. So I want to come back to that question from the previous session before I go on to the other ones coming up at the moment. So that question about AI, where do we think we'll be within 5 years, or is it even a shorter timeline? Any views from the audience, from the panel?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So I think it's perfectly feasible to have really well AI-enabled systems within the next 5 years. You've already got them out there, but they've pointed at the customer at the moment, and they're getting better all the time. The challenge will be, as I alluded to before, will you have the time, the money, and the impetus to get those systems into your business and replace what you've already got? Will you overcome the inertia and the pain that Ramesh was talking about of extracting one or two or more platforms and creating new ones and integrated versions of those within that time frame? Because then it's not a quick job. Bits of it can be, but actually overall embedding something new, you're probably talking 12 to 18 months to get it properly properly created, user testing done, comms and all the rest of it. But yes, it should be there if it will, and the technology will be there, but will your business be in a position to in place that technology in that time frame would be the real question, I think. I think that the AI bots that exist now will only get better and better and better.
Damien, did you
No,
have
I mean, it's, I think Paul already said it all, but the only piece I'd add is, I don't know if you've seen the Google AI model. It's like, you just take a photo now of any languages in the world, you're somewhere, you take the photo of the language, and it's translating automatically in the language you want, right? So that's the start of AI. In 5 years from now, I think we should be in a model where into companies, all our models are actually integrated in such a way to talk about integrated platform across all different set of products offered to employees, but they all speak to one another. And from that, you get the analytics you need to actually, drive your business, make sure your employees, are satisfied working with your organization. And we should do more of treating our employees like customers. And from us is getting the data to actually make the right decisions.
Got some really good questions coming through on Slido. So let's go for the most popular one. Do you think companies want technology for technology's sake? Or do you think, or employers I think we're talking about here, do you think they have a vision of what the outcome should be and then you work back to the technology? Which way around are we doing it at the moment?
I think it depends where you are in your life cycle, to be perfectly honest. I think if you've got technology already, you've probably got a pretty good idea of how well or not your employees interact with it, and then whether you need to make a step change. And then how do you use that data to drive the right behaviours? I think if you're in an organisation that doesn't have it, you're probably going from the other end around, I want technology, how do I use it? How do I use it to enable our people?
Do you see that quite a lot, Jamie? People being sort of the cart before the horse with technology ahead of the strategy?
Yes, and it depends what kind of company you want to be, because if you want to do it yourself and innovate it yourself, then you might be requesting certain types of technology, but I think it could get confusing when you're not doing it, but you want to do it, and then you're looking for other people to offer you technology, because it's never going to be the best fit. So it's tricky. And I think in this space as well, typical technology platforms are not so modular, so you can't switch things around easily. So then it becomes quite tricky. So having flexibility and finding a solution which will be a front end, which will give that employee experience is kind of tricky if you're stuck with something and it doesn't want to integrate with something else. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that, and I'm not a Gen X, Y, or Z, but I am reasonably geeky. And I could be accused of liking technology for technology's sake, to be honest. But certainly in the workplace and in the home, I think, the question is more, is technology being used as the provider, as the providing mechanism? Is it your slave, or is it the other way around? Are you a slave to the technology? Certainly when I look at my wife on Facebook of an evening, I'm thinking, I'm not sure she's got the balance quite right. But in business, I'm thinking the growth of understanding of user experience is what is going to drive the acquisition of technology. And I think to Damien's earlier point as well, it's going to save you a shed load of effort when you get that big data picture. Remember, if we were doing this conference 5 years ago, we'd all have been, even 2 years ago, we'd all have been talking about segmentation. You don't have to worry about segmentation when you've got this stuff. It's going to do it all for you. It's going to give you that depth of insight into your people that's going to make your decisions that much easier. And it's going to make those battles to get budget that much easier, because you'll have so much empirical data to do it with.
Just to add to all of that is, I think technology was not necessary when businesses were country-based or across 2 countries, because you could run it on work, on Excel spreadsheets or whatever. I think, organizations are becoming more global nowadays, multinational companies, cross countries. you need to have a set of information on a snapshot in terms of data analytics and dashboard. And without the use of technology, I think you would actually struggle to do that. Otherwise, you spend, hours and weeks and labor cost, or actually, putting all of this together. So for me, the evolution of technology is about technology reduces uncertainty, and with all the set of dashboard and the set of measures you put in place, it's about starting to measure. And once you've actually got the right measures in place, you can make the decisions in terms of what's helpful to your workforce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very popular question coming up from the audience. How do we retain the human touch among all this technology? Jamie?
I think it's personalization, because it would look, if you open something and it's not personalized, then you don't have a human touch at all. So I think the key thing is maybe the vernacular and the way something's written, but also the personalization. It shouldn't be that in this space that everyone sees the same thing. It should be that every app opened in an employee environment should be really tailored towards that person, what they bring, what they're doing. And that way, you feel that you have a synergy.
So give me an example. What do you mean by that?
So just on our app, we're pushing well-being outcomes, and we're trying to give people 3 minutes a day of consciousness about what they're looking for, but allowing each user to select different things, go down different paths. So when they get up in the morning, if someone says, I've got a sleep issue, then at 7 p.m. it reminds you, hey, why don't you do this? So the whole thing is it's talking to you, it's conversational and human, rather than static.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be clear about what kind of human touch it is that we're talking about. Because I don't honestly believe that in human touch terms, telling somebody how to move through a menu system in order to select a variant on a benefit is necessarily good use of human touch. The technology will take away the dross. That will leave you with conversations that might actually be worth something in terms of having with an individual. So I think the actual human touch points from a centralized reward function system will probably go down, but the quality will go up. And you'll look to those to just enhance the engagement that the technology is driving for you. Your real human touch doesn't come centrally from us anyway. Your real human touch comes through your management structures and how your managers and your culture is delivered. This is just an enhancement.
Anybody else want to talk about human touch? Shall we move on to the next
I
question?
would probably agree with what Paul's just said, that technology is really just an enabler. It gives you the insight and the data. It doesn't take away the fact you still need to have that conversation. Management teams still need to understand their people. But I think it gives you a bit more insight to be able to build on. And it makes the conversations more meaningful, more important to the individual, but because you've got something to base it on.
And just to all of that, from an employer perspective dashboard, I think that's difficult. From an employee perspective, is you have an app and you bring it home to make decisions, and you customize the branding by business units or by countries or by regions. That's where you have the human touch. Make sure you've got a full range of products. I mean, I love to have a platform like the comparemarket.com model, where you have the choice of different set of benefits, and then you go home and say, it's like, this is what I can spend, how do I bring this to home, because, I'm going to have a baby, I've got life events changes. That's the human touch of using the technology for that. Bring it home.
Mm-hmm. Another good, fantastic. You guys are really good with your questions. I'm loving these. Many businesses have far from cutting-edge reward tech in place. There's probably quite a lot of the audience. So where would you say they should start? If they had to get in a core, what would you recommend as a core basic for businesses who are seen to be lagging? Where do they start? You can't say your own product. Generic thought leadership here.
Yeah.
We take that as a given, Jamie.
It depends how far you are behind and where you need to, what the gap looks like, doesn't it? I would think today that the platforms that we were building 10 to 15 years ago, the component parts are still the right kind of component parts. So you need something that's going to manage your benefits and your flexible benefits for you, because certainly from where I'm sitting, all benefits will be flexible in the future. I can't see a need for core benefit. I see a need for personal tailoring. So you've got to have something that manages that. We just spoke about recognition and the absence of that and the impact on people. So it's a cheap way of reinforcing your culture, so that needs to be there. And then you have the need for a pension element, because you have to supply a pension, so you're going to have something. And if all you did, says he thinking carefully about this, was have those building blocks in place, and they worked really, really well, you would at least be on the right ladder. You wouldn't be on the right step, but you would at least be on the right ladder.
I guess it's also that idea of going back to, back to basic principles. What am I trying to achieve? There was a question that came up earlier that we don't want innovation for innovation's sake. We don't want technology for technology's sake. It's a good old-fashioned does reward aligned to HR strategy, does HR strategy aligned to business strategy. If you haven't got that right, then it's not clever going forward.
What you don't want is something that is a set of technologies that is so disparate, it takes you more time to manage the damn thing than you've actually got available to you. So the integrated nature of it needs to be there. And it needs to be there if you're going to get the customer experience right as well. If you're not doing single sign-on and you've got to remember different logins and everything looks different when you get there, you're not really satisfying the need that well, are you?
But how do you get that vision of what outcomes you want to achieve when it's really hard with tech. I've had this before when I've been doing stuff for work. You think, well, I don't know what it does yet, so how can I then envisage what it can achieve? And meanwhile, your tech people are saying, well, what principles, what are you after? And it's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Because you think, well, if I knew what it could do, then I could tell you what I wanted it to do. How do you,
I genuinely think so. I genuinely think it's easier than that. Because all you have to ask yourself is, what would you want? What do I want? I want something that is like Amazon, that easy to use. I want something that I can bend to fit me. And I want to be able to access it from any device at any time, and I don't want to have to be in a position where I ring a help desk because I can't figure out how to do it. That's all you need.
But Sam, you've got to just go to Sam, then I'll come across to Damien.
I think that's the key. It's about getting the basics right. It's what's important to the individual. I think more and more you see people wanting mobile-enabled technology. So I think gone are the days of someone going into the office, picking benefits and never thinking about them. More and more people now are going home, talking to their partner about their benefits selection or recognition or whatever it might be, because it's there and they're using it all the time. But it's fundamentally what's the basic principle of what you're trying to do, and also how does it integrate with things like your payroll system? So how can people get that really clear, holistic look of what am I paid, what are my benefits, what's my pension going to be in the future? That's really, really basic. Mm-hmm. And I think if you get the really simple things right, then it's easier to build on it and to think, okay, what's the next evolution? What can it do for me? What insight can I get? But I think if people don't use it in the first place, if it's not the first port of call, there's no point to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Damien.
I'll totally agree with Sam and Paul. The piece for me as well is about how many providers are actually putting the right investments forward to build a platform for tomorrow that's going to be agile enough where us old clients can fit into that and actually make it work for us. So we've described here in terms of what's the evolution. It's about having all of it in a way in terms of, the salary piece to the pension piece to the benefits piece. But is there someone on the markets who's got this type of platform where we can see the pension valuation piece as well as making decisions on bonus, do we want to defer or not, and salary and everything else. So it's really working together with providers to actually, outline what's our strategy, and providers to actually, invest where it needs to be to make it not just across one country but global as well at the same time. I know it's difficult. You've got different legislation around the world, different requirements, it's very difficult, but it's about, working together to build a model in such a way.
I know it's not coming up on the audience questions, but you've mentioned global, and we know from when you filled in, all the delegates filled in their profile, that about 2/3 of this audience have a global remit. And I think globally technology throws up really intense problems because of all the different systems and not everything integrating. Anybody on the panel just want to say one or two things for those people in this room who are looking at global technology and going grey at the thought about it?
Well, we talk global technology, but we also talk about cloud system, I think. I think it was mentioned earlier, we talked about blockchain and we talked about cloud systems. I think for organizations, it's really thinking about where's our data going to be tomorrow? What's the system of cloud? Obviously, cloud is an element of what we call ICT, which is information and communication technology. And under that, what you will have three different set of systems. You've got, what people call IaaS. You've got the systems of PaaS and SaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. And then you've got the software as a service. But what, as an employer, we would need to think, most of us will then buy the software as a service, but we need to really make sure that, we understand what the infrastructure behind it and the platforms are all about. When you want to go global, and you start thinking about providing a service to your employees/customers on a global basis, you've got to think about mobile data. And mobile data is, you are in India and you want to have access to your set of, portfolio, and you want to make choices. That's only feasible if it's in the cloud system. Otherwise, you've got to go and log into an internet platform and so on and so forth. But then, obviously, cloud systems come out with different sets of regulations that everyone needs to look into, especially around the Data Protection Act. And I don't think that any of that has actually been fully regulated today, unless anyone tells me otherwise. But it's mainly, having a good understanding about where your data is located, what's going to be the, is the data going to be deleted after how many years, and what's the use of the data? Because what you want is you want to have all this data available for global technology, available to people, but you also want it to be available to you as an employer, again, to make sure that you do your workforce analytics models over time, and you set up some key measures to build productivity model. Sorry, it's a long story.
No, I think that's a really important one to be thinking, if you're thinking globally, but realizing that regulations in different countries around data could trip you up on that front.
It's not easy, but we're coming to that. Yeah.
Which kind of leads me on in the last question, our last 2 minutes, is this thing about data. We've got a question that somebody's asked is, how do companies leverage their data to personalize the user experience of employees when interacting at work? So, maybe each panelist can just think of something around data and personalization that they can share with the audience, and how they do that. You gave an example earlier, but if you can maybe pick that one up first.
I think it's a dangerous one because it's confidential in some cases. So I think if it can leverage the data but keep it on the app without going to a server, I think it's useful, especially in what we do. I think if you can leverage data without exposing the employee that you're going to use that data, I think that's the key.
Sam?
I think it's also important not to make assumptions about people based on the choices that they make. People never fail to surprise you. So I think there is a danger of going down a route of far too much personalization based on the data that you hold on somebody, because what they do in the workplace might be completely different to what they do outside of work, or their age demographic doesn't necessarily dictate their choices, nor does their family circumstance. So I think it's really important to use it in the right way, but not to go overboard with it, because otherwise you're almost disenfranchising a whole group of people based on data you think you know and you understand, but you don't necessarily.
No, I'd agree with Sam on that one. I think I'd come back to the earlier point about the really good systems of the future will do proper segmentation for you, not stereotypical segmentation. when we were looking at changing, and Sam will know about this, if you work for a telecommunications company, most people think there's a really good phone benefit to be had in there somewhere. And
Tell me about it, please.
yes, and generally it's the bane of your life, really, because it's never good enough. It would be really easy for us to assume, looking at data following a change in the way we refreshed phones, that actually our people are not interested in phones, because something like just over 90% of them didn't take staff handsets. That would be a complete misinterpretation of the data. If we were offering the S7 as a standard handset to everybody in the business, they'd all be taking the handset. We don't, we offer a mid-range handset and so on. So I think it's helped push us down a more investigative route. And I think at the moment, the more investigative route is better than just taking a base bit of data and not questioning it and using that to tailor a benefit. So I'd urge caution, because I think in most businesses, we don't understand people well enough yet to make those kinds of shouts, to change strategy based on that kind of data just yet a while.
And Damien, one last point about personalisation and data?
Yeah, it's first having the right data in place to analyze, and I'm back to the point again of making the right decision. I've seen, I worked a long time in banking, and I've seen banking dying, especially the retail banking dying. You know, I don't know if you guys know, but in Nigeria, the biggest bank is actually Vodafone. All the banks, because Vodafone, you don't have money with you, you just use your phone to actually pay whatever you want or transfer money between accounts. If you go to a cash machine, obviously, as soon as you're outside, you're going to get stolen. And there's no use. That's an analogy, but within the banking system since the financial crisis, it's been very difficult. And unless banks have actually evolved of actually deep diving into, you know, the patterns of people's spends to build products around that, and including online banking to make it easier for people, retail banking will not be there today. And I think, you know, if I take this down into the organization, it's about trying to understand again the pattern of people's behaviors. Very soon we'll have 5 generations of people in a workplace. And we need to make sure we understand the needs of each generation of individuals in the workplace to make sense of it and have a broad range of products. But also, it's not just about the product piece for me on technology, it's also adapting the learnings, adapting the career developments for people in the workplace. And unless we got the use of that data and we capture that data in the right way, I think we make the wrong call and we'll be losing an opportunity versus the peer group or competitors.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up the panel now. I think we've touched a lot of topics really, really quickly. So can we give a huge round of applause to all of the panel? And yes.